Hi, I'm Steel Speaks, and this is my keyword guide to every single keyword in the game in the set that it was released to give you a chronological order and understanding of what heroes were added to what set, what keywords were added to what set, and make sure that if you've been away from the game for any number of sets, you can pick up exactly where you left off. This is an evergreen series, so every time a new set comes out, I will be adding to it. So if you're joining us, join in wherever you've missed out on a set, or if you're new to the game and you'd like to come back and just hear all the keywords in order, go to the top of this playlist where we start with WTR and we go through all of the videos in order, telling you what keywords were introduced and what heroes you'll find those keywords in across different sets. Moving on to Uprising, so the Draconic and Ice hero, we find several new keywords. The first thing we find is across lots of different types of equipment, which is called Quell. Quell is a variation on prevention of damage effects we've seen on other equipment, similar to Arcane Barrier. If your hero would be dealt damage, you may pay 1 to prevent 1 of that damage instead. If you do, destroy this at the beginning of the end step. So, how does this work? The first thing to note is that this is a prevention effect and is also triggered as a replacement effect. So if your hero would be dealt damage, you may pay 1 to prevent 1 of that damage. It doesn't matter how much damage your hero is taking, you can pay 1 to prevent 1 of that damage. So if you're taking 1 damage from an attack, you can obviously prevent it all. If you're taking 2 damage from an attack, you can prevent it all. The other thing important to note is that this has a delayed destruction effect. It does not get destroyed until the beginning of the end phase, neither do any other piece of equipment with Quell. That means that you can trigger Quell multiple times, but only when there are multiple sources of damage. So for example, I cannot trigger Quell 1 to prevent 1 damage twice from a 2 damage attack. But if I'm taking 2 1 damage attacks, or 1 or 2 damage attacks, or 3 damage attacks, or even 3 damage attacks, I can spend 1 each time I would take damage to prevent 1 of that damage. So pitching a blue could prevent 3 damage from 3 different sources in the same turn. Also, I could then trigger the ability on it after all of that and still get the ability from it at the end of a turn. So Quell is a very powerful effect in that the card does not get destroyed until the end of the turn, so you may trigger it multiple times, but not multiple times for the same piece of damage. Then moving on, we also have the other keyword, which is primarily found in Illusionist. It can be found in both Light Illusionist and Draconic Illusionist, though there are some instances of it in Mechanologist, and that is Transform. So Transform is the act of turning one card into another card. And to understand this, it's important to understand what Ash is. So let's have a quick look at Ash. Ash is a Draconic token generated by Dromai. You can look at the hero ability to understand why, when she pitches a red card. While Ash is under an object, that object has Phantasm, it's an Illusionist token, and it's placed under objects by the act of transforming them. So let's not talk about Phantasm because that's already been explained in the Monarch video. Let's just talk about Transform. So the act of transforming something is to take a card, like for example this Ash. I play the card that's transforming and I put the Ash, the card that's being transformed, under the card that is being transformed. And then I flip the card around to turn it into the card that it is being transformed into. So transform cards are typically and almost uniformly double-sided, which means you're going to have another side. That's the side you transform into. So you put the Ash on the table, which you generate through your other abilities. You have to have an Ash to target with this, or you can't trigger the transform ability. So you target the Ash, you play the card, flip Tumultai over, put it on top of the Ash, and then you have go again, and you have this dragon in place. So that's Transform. There are other instances of Transform that will flag later on, but at this point in the game, it only applies really to the dragons, and it is how dragons are put into play. So Dromai generates Ash through her ability whenever she puts a red card, and then targets that Ash and puts the dragon into play. You cannot generate Ash to play this card by pitching to play the card. You have to have the Ash already in play to be able to target it, right? Unless, and this is very important, unless the card that transforms does it after the card is played. So these say transform target Ash, so in order to play this, you have to be able to target an Ash. However, Billowing Mirage says when you attack with it, transform up to 1 Ash you control. Because of the timing on this, it's not happening until you attack, which is after you've played the card. So you can play this card, pitch a red card, generate an ash with Dromai, and then target the ash that you generated, because the attack step happens after the play step. Whereas this is a deliberate requirement for targeting, and this is when it comes into play. We see the return then as well of the ward keyword, which of course prevents damage equal to the amount of the ward. It's worth remembering about ward that it blocks damage in bulk, so even if you're taking 1 damage, this will still break and prevent 4 of it. So it is useful to play ward appropriately and not break, 4 ward on 1 damage. If you take 6 damage, ward 4 will prevent 4, you'll still take 2, but if you take 1 damage, ward 4 will still break and prevent 1 damage, even though it could prevent 4. We see the return of Arcane Barrier or an Ash Wings. We see a lot of Go Again on ninja cards, and it's just worth noting that we see something here that starts to act like a keyword, which is that a lot of these cards are checking for draconic cards. This is worth noting because it's a pseudo keyword. It's not actually a keyword, but it kind of functions like one. It says if you control 2 or more draconic chain links, Cinderskin Devotion has Go Again, or whatever ability that it has. It's just worth noting that controlling 2 or more draconic chain links kind of is as it says. That means you have 2 or more cards that are draconic on the combat chain, and if that is true, then this effect is met. The important thing to note is that based on when the effect is resolving, this card may count as a draconic chain link for its own ability. So in this case, it does actually count as a draconic chain link for its own ability, because Go Again does not resolve until the attack is finished, which means that by the time this is checking whether there's 2 draconic chain links, it is a draconic chain link for its own purposes. And that is true for quite a lot of the cards, but not all of them. So it is just worth noting that interaction with draconic chain links. Most of them check after, so you don't need to check beforehand, but there are some cards that might check at different times. Aside from that, we see a return of Essence of Ice and Ice Fusion from Tales of Aria, so go to the Tales of Aria video for more of an idea of exactly how that works, but the summary is essentially that you have to reveal a ice card from your hand to pay the additional cost of Fusion. Fusion is optional usually on the card, so you don't have to pay it, but you get a bonus kicker effect if you play the Fusion. That means you need 3 cards in your hand: the card you're playing, the card you're pitching to pay for that card, and the card you're fusing, because you have to pay for the card before you fuse it. Essence of Ice just lets you put ice cards in your deck, as well as the elemental card you're playing. Otherwise, you couldn't play ice cards in your deck. And that is it. That is all of the keywords in Uprising, and yeah, it's a pretty fun set. Lots of draconic and things like that going on, but the return of a few keywords and a few new ones to track. Next, we are going to Dynasty, which is another supplemental set, which just features cards for everyone. Let's break that down.